We're joined today by Sue Baktis, Senior Manager with Accenture. Thanks for joining us today, Sue. You just finished giving a wonderful presentation on why getting the taxonomy right the first time is critical for KM. And a lot of people struggle with it. It seems obvious that setting up good taxonomy from the start, it saves time and money and aggravation. So what is the number one reason why KM folks struggle to set it up well?
Yeah, I think that's because they don't get the right sponsorship involved and they don't get the right people involved. So when we as a KM organization try to figure out what the terms should be or how to classify information directly ourselves without involving the business or without involving the end users, we're not setting ourselves up for success. We need to understand what are the critical pieces of the business and understand how our users are going to be able to look for information, because ultimately the classification is about people having context to our content and about findability, being able to locate it through search and browse features.
One of the interesting things I saw when I was in the back of the room watching your talk was you talked about how making sure the taxonomy is business relevant. And what is the key to making sure that happens from the start?
Yeah, so I think that that's similar there, is really going back to getting the right people involved, understanding what is the information that we have, how do we need to present it to people, and to not overcomplicate the process. So sometimes we try too hard to say, it's about X and Y and Z, and it makes it so complicated that folks can't really make sense of it. It's overcomplicated.
You're asking too much of them?
Right, you're asking too much, and you're turning them away from, they don't want to spend the time to try to submit something, so maybe you're chasing them away, you're not going to get their content because you've made it too complex. So really making good decisions and trade-offs on what's critical to the business.
And you talk about making sure you get the taxonomy right from the start. What are some signs that the taxonomy your taxonomy is not business relevant and you need to realign the business goals at the beginning? Basically, are there signs you can say, hey, we just started, but we're in the wrong direction?
I think that's why you do user testing when you're creating it. It's an iterative process. You're not going to sit down in a room one day or over the course of a few weeks or even a month really and figure it out and get it all right. You have to take it out there, you have to test it. Somebody asked a question about something like a card sort activity. You have to do some things to get closer to your people. And look, can they find it? Are they sorting information into the same categories that I've identified? And you have to be willing to adjust. And then later on, after you implement it, you'll see it by frustrations over search. They still can't find what they're looking for. You might see it by frustrations where you have low contribution rates. It's too complex, or they don't understand how to tag it, or over tagging. They're tagging with a million things because they're not really sure if it fits in this one or this category or this other category.
So they put in all three.
Right.
Another interesting thing you talk a great deal about is how vocabulary needs to be standardized to ensure good communication for users. What's the biggest challenge to creating and implementing a standard vocabulary?
Organizations can often be very tied to their terminology, and you think, okay, we're all part of the same big enterprise, but it could be within a particular geography or within a particular business unit. They kind of feel that they have the right best terms for classification, and so you wind up duking it out a bit, trying to come up to some agreement on here's the consistent term. But the value in that is then I can benefit from content that another business unit has or that's coming from another part of the globe, because we're talking about it in the same way. But it's a challenge often to get people in their silos to think about the broader, bigger benefit.
You just mentioned people, colliding and sort of duking it out. Are there easy ways to spot problems that tell you, the vocabulary is awful and people can't collaborate? Are there simple things that you can say, okay, this isn't working, we've got to get this cleaned up?
Well, one thing we look at is usage over time. When we maybe gave a little in the creation of it and allowed people to have some more terms where we couldn't come to agreement, but then after the fact we find people aren't really using them. They aren't, we don't see them as common search terms. We don't find that people are tagging content with them. That's an indication to me that they're not the right terms, that we should clean it out. Sometimes sponsors will come back and say, this isn't meeting my needs as a business organization. Or if we see them starting to go a path to a different content storage solution, then you kind of have to come back and say, all right, what business need are we not meeting that's driving you to go someplace else or seek a solution? Is it just that you want it the way you want it? Or is it that something about what we've structured isn't meeting your needs?
And when creating a taxonomy for a project, you spoke about educating stakeholders. It seems like when people talk about struggling KM program, stakeholders not having buy-in is always at the top of the list, and along with culture. So what's the most important thing to do to educate people, but motivate them to be productive stakeholders?
That's why I gave a number of examples from sort of real daily life and talked about things like Amazon or Netflix or Pandora, because sometimes it's easier for an executive to translate what we're talking about to something they use in their everyday life. Sometimes it's harder for them to see, well, what's the business value to us internally? So using some of those examples, but also framing up, this is what we're trying to achieve. This is how it's going to help us, showing some of that, how search can be better. If your people are complaining, search stinks, why don't we have Google? That's a common complaint. Showing them how it can be better, how people can filter their results and get to an answer quickly. And thinking about the bottom line, our executives want to hear about saving time, saving money, coming up with better solutions. So kind of going after the things that will get their strengths.
And why is good taxonomy so critical to helping to identify content that an organization needs to help boost performance of business goals?
We live in we are in time where there's a lot of pressures on cost and reducing cost, and we're trying to get more done better, quicker, faster, particularly for us in the consulting industry, but in all industries. And so getting to a place where people can find what they need better, where if they get frustrated and they go off and recreate something without benefiting from the folks that have done that before, then A, they might not be coming up with the best solution, B, they might have spent time coming up with something that they could have already started from. And innovation comes from building off of good ideas. So you can innovate more when you are starting from other people's ideas and seeing what was good about it and what wasn't, and then adding on top of that. When you're, if you're always starting fresh, then you're at a distinct disadvantage.
Sue Baktis, thanks for joining us from Accenture.
You're welcome.